Hi, I'm Ryan.
I'm Dee, and welcome to the Fellowship Film Club, which is a branch off of Fellowship of Fans and Fellowship of Fandoms.
For each meeting of this film club, we're going to be watching two films and doing a deep dive on them.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so please submit in any discussion points you have or fun facts we may have missed.
As we were deciding where to kick this off, we thought it'd be fun to introduce ourselves to you guys through some of our favorite films.
We realized this was a great way to introduce our favorite films to each other, and through this, hopefully expand our horizon on the cinema front.
So we started out by trading some lists of some of our favorite films, and we each picked one we hadn't seen yet.
And for this episode, we'll be discussing the Royal Tenenbaums and Her. We hope to have you along on this lonely journey. So the first movie we'll be talking about is Her, which was directed by Spike Jonze, and it came out in 2013. This was one of the movies that I picked. It's one that I frequent, especially when I'm trying to catch the feels. And it stars Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And the tagline for this one is a Spike Jonze love story. To give you a brief synopsis of this, it's an intimate, bittersweet look at love, loneliness, and technology in a near future Los Angeles. What happens when a man falls in love with his operating system? And more importantly, how does it hold up today? So, Ryan, I put you through this. How did you feel with this movie?
So my first initial thought was it's incredible how I haven't seen this until now. It was right up my alley. I absolutely adored it. Yeah, it hits on so many things that I love. It's, great script writing, great cinematography, one of the best scores I've ever heard. Yeah, so thank you for suggesting this right off the top because it's been a long time coming for me.
I'm definitely the sad boy plug. If there's something sad, I've probably seen it and I probably recommended it. And for me, I put it at my top 10 for many reasons. So I know to the listeners out there, you think it's real easy to just create a top 10 list of your movies, but it's actually pretty hard when you get down to it. So, some of my deciding factors for Her was, have I recommended it to people a bunch? Did I leave the theater with a different emotion? Has it come back in my life years later and I still think about it? And this movie checked off all those boxes. So, that's the reason why it's top 10 for me for sure. And next up, I believe we have the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah, speaking of sad guy movies, playing a similar tune here. So this is directed by Wes Anderson, released in 2001. This is just one of my favorite movies of all time. That's an easy choice for me. So I won't list the cast here because there's too many. We'll get into that a little more later on. So quick synopsis. The Royal Tenenbaums follows the eccentric Tenenbaum family. They have three gifted children who achieve success really young before becoming deeply unhappy and dysfunctional adults. Years after their father abandoned the family, he claims he's dying in an attempt to reconnect with them. Once the family reunites under one roof, there's a whole bunch of old resentments, some secrets, and some unresolved relationship drama that comes to the surface, which leads to a bunch of humor, heartbreak, forgiveness, healing, and all the feels, like we said before. So, like I said, this lands on my list easy. It's one of my favorite films ever. I've seen it a whole bunch of times. No matter how many times I watch this, it never fails to hit me right where it counts. So, how'd you get on with this?
So I think we talked off camera about this before, but I actually messed up the director, and I think I confused a different Anderson. So I was like, "Oh, I know him. I love his movies." But I think I was thinking of Paul. Was it Paul Thomas Anderson? And so I actually had a bit of a culture shock watching this movie because I have not seen a single Wes Anderson film. So this was my first, and this kind of goes to show the importance of why I wanted to do this film club. Is I wanted to broaden my horizons and catch some of our cinema blind spots. So yeah, the Royal Tenenbaums. I would say I enjoyed the film, and it had so much packed into it that I need to I probably have to watch it a couple more times to fully get its like beauty, because especially because I went into it thinking it was gonna be one thing and it was totally wrong. So yeah, overall though, it's definitely worth watching. So yeah, I can see why it's on your top 10 for sure.
I still can't get over how funny it is to me to have somebody expecting something like There Will Be Blood or Boogie Nights and then getting the Royal Tenenbaums instead. That's fantastic. I'll never stop thinking about that. That being said, uh, from here on out, as we dive into a deeper discussion of each film individually, there are going to be spoilers. We hope you all have watched these ahead of time before joining us, because going forward, we're going to be announcing what we're watching ahead of time for you. That way, you have time to, watch along with us. Send us in any thoughts, opinions, questions that you want to add to our discussion. We will let you in on how to do that a little bit later on. But yeah, so diving into the Royal Tenenbaums first. Like I said before, this is just one of my favorite films that I've ever watched. I'm a big fan of Wes Anderson in general. I like all of his films. There's something about his style and his cinematography that I love so much. His attention to detail really just puts you in his universe, and you really feel like you're in that movie and with those characters. And there's just something to me about writing a script that is at its core about very relatable people and very relatable things, but making them so quirky and whimsical, sort of like gives you this weird uncanny valley kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. And this one just really is kind of peak Wes Anderson for me. I love this ensemble cast. I feel like they're all adding little bits of themselves to this story. I love the script co-written by Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson together. Those two really jive well together to me. I feel like all the scripts they've written together all really hit. Yeah, I don't know. What's some of your deeper thoughts here?
Yeah, so with the Royal Tenenbaums, like you said, there's some whimsy to it, and I wasn't. I guess I was semi expecting it because I actually remember this trailer coming out back in like 2001. I remember it was kind of a departure for Ben Stiller because he most likely was in a comedy at that time. Like maybe he branched off a couple of times, but at least, I mean, 2001, I was 11 years old, so I wasn't like any kind of cinephile at that point. I just, oh, what's on? Let's watch it. So seeing like the matching tracksuits and stuff, I'm like, what is this? What is this movie? I'm glad there was a lot more heart to it, and yeah, one of the interesting characters is obviously probably considered one of the main characters because the Royal Tenenbaum Royal. It was interesting to see that perspective of a character dealing with loneliness and I guess having a health scare, I guess you could say. That's another thing I should need clarity on. But I'm pretty sure like the doctors said it wasn't anything major, right? But he like kind of lied to his family and was just like he used it as an excuse basically.
Yeah, it starts out as him just lying to Ethylene as a way to try to get back into their lives, because I think he's at a point in his life where he's kind of lost everything he ever built up, and he's come to a place of sort of like you said loneliness, but also some regret and remorse, maybe a little bit, where he's trying to find a way back into his family's lives, but I don't think he feels himself to be a redeemable character at this point. So I think he in true scumbag fashion, the way that he finds his way back in is by lying about having a fatal illness. But yeah, that shot where he is telling Ethylene that he's dying is one of my favorite shots. I love that oneer where he's tracking the two of them walking down the sidewalk, and he just holds that side profile, and it's so funny to watch the points when each of them come and go from the frame, because he doesn't follow both of them with the camera the whole way through that one shot. He chooses specific points where one of them will leave the frame and the other comes back in, and vice versa. And it's really fun to watch the back and forth they go through, where there's him lying to her, and then sort of like every time he says something he sort of walks it back, and then she pushes him on it and he walks it back, and he keeps trying to push the line of how much he can get away with here. And I don't know, that shot is so funny to me, and both of those actors really just nail that. And I love just the humor in Angelica Houston getting angry with him in that scene is fantastic.
I'm dying. You are? Kind of. Oh, I'm mad at you. No, I am dying. I promise I'm dying.
And doesn't he follow it up with like, well, isn't everyone?
Yeah. Like technically everyone does die, so yeah, that's his way out of it.
But yeah, to finish answering your initial question, I don't know if you caught on to this, having only watched it once, but when he's on bed rest in the house, the doctor that is in there is not a real doctor at all. It's who is it? It's somebody who worked at the hotel with him, I believe, or who worked at the hotel where he got kicked out of,
Was it
and then
Pagoda
he
or no?
Pagoda is his assistant who kind of just sticks by him the whole way. That's another scene I love so much is when he stabs him outside when they're
Oh
getting in the
yeah.
taxi.
Yep.
But yeah, the doctor that's in the house with them is never a real doctor. So the I don't I could be wrong in my memory here, but I don't think there's ever a legit health scare involved here. I think he's always lying about it, and he just keeps leaning in because he keeps doing more and more irredeemable things to his family. So I think his only way of attempting to reconcile with them is by lying and making them feel bad for him. And yeah, it just goes to further solidify the kind of character that he is. And that performance by Gene Hackman is just stunning to me. And I love I've read that there was some behind the scenes tension between him and Wes Anderson, and he got annoyed with Anderson's direction quite often, and that doesn't surprise me at all. I see, Gene Hackman's got that old school Hollywood, movie star vibe, and Wes Anderson is someone who's very meticulous and very detail oriented, and seems to do, lots of takes and knows exactly where he wants everything in each shot. So that relationship is funny to me to imagine.
Yeah, and thinking about that, I stumbled up upon that as well when I was doing some research, and it was kind of sad the way it was written because it was basically like they were framing it like it was towards the end of Gene's acting career, so he wanted fun movies to be a part of, and the way it was worded was like Wes promised, like, oh yeah, it'll be a fun time, and then he ended up like getting into many fights, and at one point he said to Wes, yeah, I'm not having any fun. And Wes like took it to heart and felt horrible. And it reminded me of like hearing that story. It's a slight tangent, but in Community, there's famous stories of Chevy Chase, and he had a lot of controversy behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, like one of the things he was disgruntled about was the hours of filming. So it was grueling for him, and he just wanted, an easier task to work on. So unfortunately, that's what I thought of when I heard that story. I was like, no, I feel bad. He's like on his retirement and then getting in a grueling thing, probably with many takes. And yeah, so I did feel bad for him, but there's two sides to every story. So hopefully they amended at some point in there. I haven't heard. So
Yeah, that I don't know. I do the other detail that I love about that story is how Wes Anderson wrote that role for Gene Hackman and then went to him and told him basically, "Hey, I'm writing this movie and I have this part that I'm writing for you." And he basically was just like, "Don't do that. I don't want it." He's like, "I'm doing it anyway."
wow.
And then we got here. But yeah, speaking of performances, I think maybe breaking down some of this large ensemble cast could be fun. I just like you mentioned Ben Stiller earlier, and I think he is an actor who adds a lot to this movie. I like his balance of, you know, tragic, sad guy mixed with his typical style of humor really works for me in this. That initial scene where you see him with his kids practicing the fire drill in their house is just always so funny to me. And then it's so heartbreaking when you realize that he's so neurotic because he lost his wife in an accident.
It's so tough. There's so many like between that and I thought, but I don't know if you thought this at all. But based on my research, it didn't pull up anything. I thought the tracksuits was like a character design because you can like easily get in and out of them. And I was thinking, is that also related to the panicking at like midnight when there could be a fire or something? Get out of the house, but allegedly it has nothing to do with that. It's just Wes liked
I
it.
think you're pretty spot on. I mean, I also think the choice to make them bright red has something to do with that too, because if they're in that situation and his kids are running out of a building with him, it's pretty easy to spot two curly haired kids in bright red tracksuits amongst the crowd. So I don't know. In my mind, you're spot on with that.
But yeah, between like this cast, it was insane. Like, because I went into it blind. Like, I didn't read any synopsises. I just was like, all right, I remember the trailer from, how long ago was it? Over 20 years? Is it
25, yeah.
5 years? So I was like, oh, I remember the tracksuit, Ben Stiller. I think I remember Owen Wilson. So like actually seeing the cast unfold, like I didn't realize that Gwyneth Paltrow was in it. Danny Glover, that was a big surprise for me. I was like, wow, I haven't seen him in a while. So seeing him on that, and Bill Murray, I think I remember him in the trailer, and I was expecting a bigger role from him because I feel like they did feature him a lot in the trailer. But yeah, I feel like he didn't have as much screen time as some of the other people. But I mean, there was a lot of characters, so I got to spread it all around. But I think the performance that took me the most by surprise was actually Luke Wilson as Richie. He had a lot of story, like one of the storylines, like the shocker of the movie. I did not see coming at all. Like it was a complete 180 for me. And I feel like he did a good job of playing that like kind of reserved loner and kind of suppressing his feelings and not really communicating to anyone. So it was how about you? Like, was there any performances that stood out a lot to you?
I mean, it's hard to pick out one. I mean, to just echo off your point about Luke Wilson, I feel like there's a ton of depth in that character and in that performance, and yeah, that scene is heartbreaking every single time between like the color palette that they chose there mixed with that needle drop, the needle in the hay, and yeah, just that scene gets me every time. It's rough, but yeah, that's a great performance. Yeah, I don't know that I could necessarily pick a favorite here. I think that knowing that Owen Wilson co-wrote this script and then ended up playing a character like Eli is hilarious to me. It's almost like giving yourself like one of the goofier, more silly characters here, and I like that thought. I like that he had a hand in writing some of those lines for himself. That's pretty funny to me. I just love that performance, and then one of the heartbreaking lines of the movie towards the end when he says to Royal, he's like, "I always wanted to be a Tenenbaum," and then Royal's like, "Me too."
Oh yeah,
That's a tough one.
yeah. There's so many great lines, and I wish I caught more of them for this, but I'm sure on the rewatch. But I feel like wasn't one of the tagline "Family isn't a word, it's a sentence" like that? Didn't Royal speak that?
That's a good question. I can't recall if it's actually spoken in the film or not, but I do like that as a tagline.
Wow. Yeah, I
You
might
could
be
be
right.
right though. I don't know.
I'll have to correct us in the comments. Yeah, the other performance, yeah. So Owen Wilson. One thing I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this. I was watching it on the Criterion 4K edition, so like stuff was a little bit more vivid. The scene when he's on the bridge with Gwyneth Paltrow, I feel like he had like interesting makeup done on him. And at first I was like, I had to Google it after, but yeah, he's dealing with drugs, so I'm sure that that's why they did it. But I couldn't tell. Like, did you notice that at all? Like,
I don't recall that off the top of my head at all. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if it was a specific character choice they made for Eli at that point, because he was, like you said, dealing with the drug addiction, but also he was still a very public facing author who was trying to keep his career from going off the rails at that point. So he may have been, like I said, that may have been a conscious character choice for him. I think that's pretty funny if it was.
yeah. And another random segue. Are you familiar with the recasting that occurred in this movie halfway through shooting?
That I know of, no.
So I read this and I was like, "There's no way this is true." It is absolutely true. Mordecai was recast halfway through the. Did you hear this story?
No.
Someone stole Mordecai, the original Hawk, and went to the production crew with like requesting ransom for it. And they didn't have enough time to delay shooting, so they actually got another Hawk, and the other Hawk was slightly different and had more white feathers. So they wrote into the movie like, "Yeah, I have. Oh, this it has more white feathers now." So all of that from someone stealing a hawk. Like, how crazy is that?
That's a funny story. I'm shocked I hadn't heard that before. I think that's one of the things that I love about Wes Anderson as a filmmaker so much is like anybody else could have just glossed over that and hope people don't notice. But I love that he's so detail oriented to put a line in to reference that.
Never would have noticed too. That's crazy that he did that. Like such attention to detail there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good little trivia bit there. I hadn't heard about. I like that.
Yeah, the other thing I was kind of talking about prep and all that. Like, it seems like he's very detail oriented. In the Criterion version, they actually have a map of the house,
Mhm.
and it's not, I think it was his brother that he was working with,
Yeah,
and his brother was like drawing the actual dollhouse, and he had details of everything he wanted in every character's room, and it's pretty fascinating to see. Maybe if we can find it, we can throw it up on the screen for a second, but yeah, it was really cool to see how much like character you can kind of fit in a screen, like in each room,
mhm.
basically, because there's like so much backstory for each character in there.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely one of the things I love about his filmmaking so much is I feel like his sets always sort of almost feel like a character in themselves. And I love his use of symmetry in all of his shots and just the color palettes he chooses all the time. It really like brings a certain, tone and feel just by the way it looks. I really like that a lot. There's also to what you were talking about. If you look in the special features on the Criterion disc, there's a short bit where it shows him and his brother behind the scenes when they were building the actual set. Like for much of that house, they actually built out a physical set to film in, and it
Wow.
was pretty cool to watch that. If that's something you haven't seen,
I have to check that out. That's crazy. Awesome. The other thing that caught mentioning the color palettes too. We'll discuss it later with her, but I do like when filmmakers create a unique look, and color is a big part of that. And like Royal Tenenbaums, like the colors really popped in this. Like the choices they made between the characters' outfits, the wallpapers. It's yeah, it was pretty cool to see like what he was able to accomplish, and I can only imagine having to how many like the art department, what they had to deal with, and color matching and stuff. It's yeah, it had to have been a lot.
yeah, yeah, and he's back there, picking out every single detail of everything and every picture that's hanging up on the wall, and yeah, it's cool. It's one of I can't remember which kid's room it's painted in. I want to say it's in Richie's room, but there's scenes of their childhood like painted on the walls, and his brother actually painted those on there.
Oh,
This is pretty cool little detail. You notice a couple of them throughout the movie, but they touch on it in that behind the scenes bit as well.
pretty cool. I think I read something, I don't know if you caught this, but when the characters are reading books, they're usually reading another character's book. Did you see that? I thought that was an interesting fact or tidbit that maybe is a fact. I guess we'll have to see.
I'll have to look more into that. I'm not sure. That would be interesting though. One of the things that really stands out to me so much about this movie is kind of how right off the bat you see them as children, and they're not typical children. They're very sophisticated and mature for their age, but yet they're still so latched onto their mother the whole time. And then when you find them all back in that house again as adults, you realize that not a single thing has changed for them. They're all very it's almost like they got stuck being children. Like they're all very emotionally and their maturity is kind of stunted. Like they're very childlike. They still very much depend on their mother. They're all codependent in one way or multiple on someone else. But yeah, it's a very interesting character study for me every time I watch it to kind of pick apart the ways that their upbringing sort of shaped them into the adults they became, and how none of them ever really got the right type of growth and development that they clearly needed along the way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another thing I noticed while watching is Margot was always introduced as the adopted daughter, and the framing every time, like I picked up on it through watching, is anytime there is a group shot, she's always in the back away from the
Mhm.
main family. And I was like, I'm sure that was a creative choice to do, but it's interesting to see how they kind of by introducing her as the adopted daughter, like she didn't get the same cohesiveness as the rest of the family. And it was yeah, so I noticed it early on, like, oh, it's weird that they have like all of them grouped and then she's kind of in the background, and then I just kept picking up on it, so I'm like, oh, they must be doing that on purpose. And it's brilliant, they're kind of signaling that she's not or she's kind of considered separate by Royal
Mm.
specifically. But
Yeah, and you can definitely see how that translated into who she became as an adult too. She's very isolated and closed off and rebellious, and clearly looking for like a place of belonging in her life. So yeah, I definitely think that, all of that being solidified for her while she was growing up definitely shaped the way she became as an adult.
yeah, and the love interest in this as well, because my first time watching it, and I'm also watching House of the Dragons right now because it's currently airing. And dare I say, there's a lot of sibling love, and I was like, wait, is this her biological? Like, I was confused for a second. I'm like, this is a biological brother. What's going on here? But I was like, oh yeah, adopted. And I was able to pick up on that, and yeah, another clarity that would help me. Owen Wilson, was he just like a neighborhood friend? Like he was the
Yeah.
next door kid?
Yeah, he lived like across the street, I believe, and he was always friends with the kids growing up. And then that's another funny bit too to me when you watch, funny and sad really, is how you find out that while he was growing up, he was always sending all of his like awards and essays and magazine articles to Ethylene to kind of get that like motherly fulfillment along the way, and like he's trying to, you know, please his way into their family a bit more, and it makes that "I wish I was a Tenenbaum" line hurt even a little bit more.
Gotcha. Wow. So Eli had some parallels to Royal, basically, like both of them trying to get into the family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is yeah, and again, it kind of adds another layer to that. The fact that he delivers that line to Royal, and Royal's like, "Me too."
See, that's why, yeah, I definitely have to rewatch it. I think the first time was like I did a high level pass. Now I'm going to be able to dive into the details. And
Yeah, I kind of think that the same could go for any of Wes Anderson's films. Really, I think there's some really strong script writing in all of his movies, and that one in particular, with how many people are in that cast, I think it's a fun exercise to kind of focus on a different character each time you watch it, and sort of like pay attention to what's going on with a different person each time, and sort of little fun character exercise there to kind of dive deeper into each one, and it almost like changes the feeling of the movie a bit too, because if you're just focusing on Richie, you're having a pretty bad time the whole way through. But if you focus on like Eli, there's a lot of humor there with the sadness, and same goes for like Royal or Pagoda, or there's a lot of humor throughout the whole movie, but it it kind of ebbs and flows depending on what you're what's drawing your attention that time around.
yeah, one thing I was shocked by is towards the end of the movie with the car crash.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, like at the end of this, the dog's gonna come out fine, or like what? Because it's semi comedic. I'm like, okay, they'll figure out a way to save the dog, but it's just like, nope, dog replaced.
yeah,
Royal buys, and that was like a nice act of Royal to basically barter with the fireman to get a new dog. But yeah,
yeah. That's a great segue too into something I wanted to touch on. Is I do think that it's worth talking about the few points in the film where you do see glimpses of him maybe garnering some redemption in a way. I think that's one of those moments where in that moment he realizes that what he needs to do is be there for his son, and find something to do to comfort him. And then Ben Stiller with the ultimate gut punch of the entire film when he says, "I've had a rough year, Dad." I'm like, I can't make it through that line anytime I watch that movie. But then another moment where I think he really shows some growth and redemption is when he's on the rooftop with Richie after the suicide attempt, and he really shows an understanding of what Richie needs in that moment, and he really gives him that sort of shoulder to lean on, and he's really there for him rather than sticking to his usual character trope of being selfish or making it about himself. Like he really shows some growth in that scene as well. So yeah, I think it's nice and adds some complexity and character depth to have those few scenes in there where it actually does give him that little bit of you know dynamic or that hope for redemption a little bit, even though he just kind of doesn't change the whole time.
yeah, that was the question I was gonna ask you. Is do you feel like his character changed at all from the beginning to the end? And terms of motivation. So like at the beginning, he's lying like maybe for a selfish reason of just like he feels lonely and wants to reconnect. But then you see those little glimpses throughout the movie of him actually caring and trying. So
Mm,
do you feel like there's a little redemption for him, or like do you feel like his motives may have shifted towards like less selfish and more like, oh, I should care more about these
mm,
family members? Like for me, I guess I fell for it, but I always felt like if like think about Breaking Bad and Walter Roy, it's like you're kind of rooting for him when you shouldn't be because he's a terrible person.
mhm.
So I don't know if this same thing happened to me with Royal, but how did you feel towards the end? Did he have any redemption there or no?
I think so. I not fully, but I do think so. And I think the points that I was just talking about are a couple examples of that. I think another good point is when he takes Ari and Uzi out around town and is just bringing them around to finally be kids because they never really got that yet. They have been, you know, in their military training with Chaz so far and not had a chance to really just be children yet. And that's a touching scene too, where they're, riding on the back of the fire truck and they're gambling under the bridge. And he's echoing the things that he did with his own kids with his grandkids now. And that's kind of a nice touching moment. It's a little humorous that he thinks he chooses to do with them, but it's a nice moment. I do. Yeah. So like I said, I think yes, but not fully. I think people are complex. And that's one thing I love so much about films is you get the opportunity to see that complexion and think about it and form opinions on things like that. And you get things that aren't so cut and dry and black and white. And I think that makes for much more interesting characters and interesting stories. And because I think if you told this story in a way where he either fully deserves that redemption or fully doesn't by the end, I think you have a less comical and less complex story to tell and less nuance going on there. And I don't know, I just think it makes for much more of that whimsy and humor and nonsense that goes on in this movie. And I think my last note on that is I think I have the exact quote written down somewhere, but I love Royal's tombstone after he
Oh
died.
yeah.
It's some I can't find the exact quote here.
Saved his family or something from a
Yeah, it's shoot. I know I have it. It's something along the lines of like died tragically rescuing his family from a sinking ship or something like that. But I love that little touch at the end of the movie where it's like because like you said, you get so sucked in and sympathetic towards this character, and then that's like his one last little send off where he's like, hey, I'm still here, guys, don't worry. Not the truth at all. He's not capable of telling the truth even in death, and I think that that's a really fitting and hilarious way to cap off that character.
I agree. Totally agree. All right. So now we're going to move on to another film that tackles loneliness, but in this time at a totally different angle. That movie is Her. So, like with the Royal Tenenbaums, we're now entering spoiler territory. So, if you want to watch the movie for yourself, if you haven't seen it and don't want to be spoiled, go check it out and then come back to this and see your thoughts. So, so now, Ryan, I recommended a pretty doozy of a movie to you, Her, that made it to my top 10 list, if you can believe that. And to kind of give some context there, I'm pretty sure I saw this either in theaters or directly when it came to, I can't even say streaming because I don't think streaming exists. I think it was like Direct TV. Yeah. Whenever it came there. So this is, was it 2013? 2013. So I was about 23 years old when this came out, and at the time dealing with breakups and what have you. So I got this movie at the perfect time for heartbreak. And I feel like with art, people experience art differently depending on the state they're in. So I got this probably in the best state you could possibly be in. I was going through a breakup, and this movie echoed everything I was feeling at the time. And what was interesting about this movie in particular is when you think about rom-coms or dramas dealing with heartbreak, a lot of times, like when it's from the male perspective, there's like two ways it can go. It's either he wins her over at the end and wins her back, or it's some revenge rampage where he finds ways to make their lives harder. With this movie, though, I feel like it accurately depicts the loneliness you feel as a male. I guess I can say from the male perspective. I feel like they did a really good job of showcasing that and the different things you go through during that time period where there's some tropes that you see in dramas like this, like when you're in your house that's now empty, you have like memory flashbacks based on like different experiences you had and certain furniture or photos on the wall or whatever. So it touched upon that, but with this, one thing I always said when I was pitching this, so this is back in 2013. I was like, it's a sci-fi movie that has more heart than most dramas out there. And unfortunately, in 2026, this movie is becoming more and more accurate and truthful. So as of this year, and I think even last year, we do have people falling in love with their AI assistants. And if you were to like, it might be hard, like if you haven't seen this movie, to kind of have the background you have now of everything AI is doing. But 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago when this thing came out, it felt like a sci-fi concept. Like it seemed like it was possible, but while viewing this the first time, it was like, yeah, I guess maybe we can have AI that sounds human like, but if you think about back then, we had like maybe like the Stephen Hawking voice in our computer. Like that's the best we had. Like you couldn't envision like clear AI conversation. So before we dive into the movie, have you had AI conversations before?
I'm someone who is kind of a boomer with AI, both intentionally and accidentally. Yeah, so I have not. I just try to avoid it as much as I possibly can. And also, I've seen Black Mirror. I've seen all the other things we could throw out there that are, you know, great warning signs. And then also, watching this film for the first time in 2026 was an interesting feat as well. But yeah, I mean, I can't say that I have. So that part of it to me wasn't directly relatable, but that's what I love so much about films. And it's, I think Roger Ebert said this: film is the great empathy machine. And that quote sticks with me all the time. And I'm like, I've watched so many movies where I don't necessarily have things in common with the people I'm watching on the screen, but I still find myself connecting to them in ways that don't make sense. And that's one of the things I love the most about movies. And that happened to me with this. I've been very lucky to be in the same relationship that I am in now with my wife since I was 18 years old.
This guy
So
bragging over here.
again, I'm very lucky and fortunate. But so to me, this movie doesn't hit me directly in that, like breakup kind of way like that. But again, film is powerful and it finds ways when done well to connect with you even if you don't necessarily connect with what the characters are portraying on the screen. Like this performance by Joaquin Phoenix is powerful. Like there's even from the first opening shot when it's just a super tight close up of his face as he's reading one of the letters he's writing. Just you can see so much just in his eyes, and you just feel like this dude's going through something. Like he doesn't even have to say anything yet. You just know, he's not having a good time. So this is a powerful movie, even if you don't connect with the relationship aspect of it. I also think one of the things that was super strong about this for me was that it really read as kind of just a warning sign of this path that we've been going down since the internet has been in our lives so much of, having less and less genuine human connection in our lives. And I think AI was a cool vessel to choose to tell this story because back then, like we were talking about, it wasn't what it is now. It was very sci-fi. Now the fiction is almost gone from this film at this point. It's very real and happens and yikes. But yeah, I really like how this film really more than anything else to me read like a warning sign against losing this human connection that we all need in our lives. And I think one of the things I love the most about this movie is Amy Adams' character. She's very, not necessarily a main character, but besides being one of my favorite actors of all time, this role is very subtle but so important. Like she just feels like a warm hug in a movie that is bleak and hopeless and depressing and scary. And I don't know, I love her character in this and I love her performance of this character, and I love that she is kind of the one person that Theo can connect to in a real way throughout this film. It's like every time, he goes through something, you know, he has his ups and downs. She's always the one that's there that has that genuine connection with him. And that's why the ending of this film hits so hard. And we can touch more specifically on that later if you want. But yeah.
And to remind everyone, the original question was, did you use AI?
Yeah. This is why we started a podcast, folks.
And for me to rewind for a second, I use AI day to day for different work things, whatever. But the conversation piece, I only dabble when I'm on long drives. I find it useful because a lot of like your mind wanders when you're driving. And I have the feature now in my car where you press the button and you can talk to Google Gemini directly. And so a lot of random thoughts will pop in my head. It'll be like, oh, like how far is the sun from Earth? And then it'll talk, and then it definitely doesn't sound like a person I'm talking to because it will like kind of talk like a computer and give me suggestions like, oh, since you talked about the distance of the sun, why not ask how far it is from Pluto? And then so like I'm on a drive and I'll just get into these crazy tangents that like, oh, where's like the next habitable planet we should explore, and like so that I find useful, but I wouldn't consider that like AI in the terms of how Samantha is in this movie. It's more so like having Google speak back to you, basically. So I find that useful when you're kind of trapped in your car, but I have yet to use it to become my friend. But who knows? Maybe in the future.
So I have a quick follow up for you on that. Do you ever find yourself questioning or not trusting the information that's being given to you in these conversations? Like for in your example of asking how far the sun is, like do you have confidence that you're being given accurate information?
Ooh, that's a great question. If you asked me this when like ChatGPT and all that first came out, I'd say absolutely not. It was always way off, and I'm like, that's not what I asked. Like, no. But I can say the models have been getting better. Like, obviously, if you're working on something important, don't trust it. But for the most part, it seems to be fairly accurate now. And you got to use your best judgment too. Like, if it's like the sun is 1 mile away from Earth, like, okay, that doesn't seem right. But if it's believable, it's like, okay, that's good enough for me. But yeah, if your life depends on it, maybe don't trust it. Like,
Yeah. I think this is one of the things that makes me so fearful or reluctant towards things like this is because I think as we become more comfortable or if it goes further more reliant on these interactions or this information, it it kind of makes you wonder where we get to a point when that level that you mentioned of critical thinking or using your own common sense, like when does that go away? You know what I mean? That's what I worry about, where I'm like, if people lose the ability to have that level of critical thought, then like we're pretty doomed.
oh yeah, and to think about it too, like we're dealing with phone interfaces right now, but eventually it's going to be streamed right into our brains, like through transmitters. And like, imagine that you're going to have like all the information you need, but with that, people could figure out how to hack people's brain. Like, it could get Black Mirror times 1,000. And so, like with this movie, at least it's like a tangible, like you could see this future happening, sad, and it already is happening. That's the
Yeah.
sad thing. But that's so you mentioned like kind of the human connectedness and how it's a necessity. And one thing this film does pretty greatly is it shows when the AI starts, I guess, when more people are adopting it in the movie, when you're looking at the scenes and looking at the background people, you start to see that a lot of them are just talking to their phones and they're not like, there's not a lot of actual connection. And when there is connection, the movie highlights it. Like there's the family, I think, at the mall, and they're kind of talking about how they all met and stuff. And then you kind of get some of the glimpses into Theodore's dating, which that could be another fun topic to talk about. Let's talk about that for a second. So that's another thing I feel like this movie does great, of realistically depicting dating, um, at least to me, because when you're freshly going through a breakup and you're trying to find someone new and all that, you get into these modes where you're hoping that person meets your expectations, so you put unrealistic expectations on those people. And they're speaking of humor, like you have the Kristen Wiig character. So like stuff like that can happen in real life when you expect someone to be a certain way and then like some crazy fact comes out. I could go into stories of my personal life, but I'll leave that for another time. So if you're interested, I've had similar things like that pop up where I'm just like, oh, I was not expecting that.
And for those wondering why you didn't see Kristen Wiig in this film, she voiced the woman that Theo was talking to on the sex hotline early in the film that goes into some wild details about a cat. And I'll leave it there.
Yep. So we had that one. We had other in-person dates. I forget.
It's the one with Olivia Wilde, I believe, right? I don't remember. I don't think we ever even find out her character's name, which I found fascinating. I didn't really pick up on that until my second watch, but I don't think she ever gets a proper introduction at all. Like, I think she's just woman he's on a date with. I don't think she has a name at all, which is, I think, adds a bit to the emotional, like, lack of emotional awareness that he has and the lack of sort of emotional maturity, I guess.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great point. And his current state of not being ready to form a new relationship with someone. And that's kind of a theme throughout this, of it's kind of like falling into something out of convenience. It's like the AI is convenient, it's going to follow your every need and do everything you want, so it can't disappoint you, so it's a safe bet to go with it. And yeah, it's interesting how the film kind of shows how that relationship evolves.
And you, like, to your point there, you really see how he struggles throughout when early on in that relationship with Samantha, he's very much in control of when they interact and how they interact. And, she's sort of still figuring out her own intelligence in a way. So he's very much in control of all of their interactions and their relationship. And you really see his lack of, emotional growth throughout their relationship when she starts to gain a little bit of autonomy in their relationship and he can't handle that.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many instances throughout this movie where you feel like he had chance, like this is the like rooting for the character to be their best selves, and like you want them to have the happy ending, but there's like multiple times throughout the movie you're like, oh, what are you doing, Theo? Like, just do what? No. And yeah, so the movie does a good job of painting that picture. Another thing related to this movie that I think we should touch on too, well, a couple things with the casting, I guess we can get into. Was Chris Pratt a surprise for you in this? Like, did you anticipate him being in the movie?
Watching it in 2026, it did throw me a little bit. And then I kind of put myself in a spot where I was like imagining what was Chris Pratt doing in 2013. And it makes a lot more sense when you look at it through that light. And I think at that point in his career, that character was very fitting for him. Yeah. And it had that little bit of like Andy Dwyer kind of silly, like adolescent humor going on. He was kind of aloof and just, yeah, goofy guy. But yeah, watching that film now, it did throw me for a surprise because he's obviously grown so much in his career since then. But yeah, and I love that mustache on him. It's very funny.
I think for me too, like I want to say I saw her, then got into Parks and Rec. I forget how far along it was in 2013. Like for all I know, it could have wrapped by then. But
I can't remember off the top of my head either.
But I guess I started watching that maybe through reruns, or maybe it was while it was airing, and then I revisited it like a year later. I was like, oh my god, that's that's Andy Dwyer. Like what? I wasn't expecting that. The other casting, I did some. I don't know how, but I picked it up instantly. Did you know who voiced the alien character in the video game?
I feel like at a certain point I read about this after watching, but it's escaped me at this point.
So it's the director, Spike Jones.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't. I think the reason why I recognized his voice was his appearances in Jackass. Some of
Oh,
his characters, like I think he plays the old late, like head to toe in old lady gear, and he
Okay.
has like a higher pitched voice, and it's close to the alien sound. So I think that's how I clocked it. But yeah, that's a whole other fascinating story of hearing how Spike Jones got into the industry, because he was basically pretty close with the Jackass guys through skateboarding and BMXing. Like he was part of I think he was part of Big Brother or a different skate mag. But yeah, a whole other fascinating thing. But yeah, so that was interesting. So he was the alien child in that, like profanity laden. It was hilarious. Um,
yeah. All the interactions between Theo and the alien are so funny.
and I love like the balance of this movie. There's heartbreaking stuff. There's like humor that's like actually like really funny, like laugh out loud at times. But yeah, I like for me, this might be a crazy tangent, but I feel like Scrubs is an example of something that pulls that off, where like that show is just wacky most of the time, but then randomly it just slaps you in the feels like really hard. This movie probably does a better job of blending both because it's super depressing most of the time.
It's nice when a movie pulls this balance off though, because this is overall a pretty melancholy film,
Yes.
and I don't really ever find, at least to my taste, that any of the humor really feels forced in a way.
Yeah.
I feel like it all feels pretty organic, and had a couple good laughs for me. And honestly, like going back to the interactions between Theo and the video game avatar, it's another example of showing his immaturity to me, because it's like sitting there watching him do the little like VR motions, like he looks so silly and childish, and then he even his back and forths with the alien, it's so juvenile every time. But yeah, it still makes me laugh though, and it's very on brand for his character.
I'm pretty sure I did a spit take for the Kristen Wiig piece too. I was just like, not expecting that at all.
It's because it keeps going.
Yeah.
Like, it gets to a point where you're like, oh, okay, this is weird, and then it's still going.
Recommend this movie and watch it with your parents.
That would make for a really uncomfortable situation for many reasons. Speaking of uncomfortable situations,
Great segue. I think I know where you're going.
one of my, maybe, I don't know, favorite is a weird way to put this, but I think a scene that sticks with me from this movie is the first time that Theo and Samantha get intimate, I'll call it, because I don't know. Calling it sex seems weird because yeah, I don't know. Anyway, you know the scene I'm talking about where he's lying in bed and it starts out seeming wholesome, like just talking about like physical touch and just being romantic, and then it tails off. And this scene to me is a really impressive bit of filmmaking. I love how it starts out, like I said, being a bit wholesome, or feeling like it's going to be anyway, and then as it gets more and more uncomfortable, the score gets louder and louder and louder until the point where it's almost uncomfortable to listen to. And then as they transition into being overtly sexual, you're just watching a black screen throughout the rest of that scene. I think that the combination of that volume of the score in that point and just being forced to watch a black screen for, I don't know, it's probably like 30 or 40 seconds long. It's just really telling you like, hey, something here doesn't feel like this is supposed to be happening. But I think that was a nice way of kind of, show don't tell in there. Like I loved the choices there, and just going back to that score because I can't stop thinking about it. That is one of the greatest scores I've ever heard. I put it on whenever I read now. It's so good. I loved it.
Shout out Arcade Fire. Another great thing about that scene too is I feel like whether it was intended or not, it's almost like a great metaphor or symbolism or whatever the right word is for a long distance relationship, because like when you're dealing with someone that's on the other side of the country or whatever, you kind of have to force yourself to have intimate moments that are disconnected, and I feel like it did a good job of depicting that, whether intentional or not. But you have the added layer of it's with AI and not another person.
That's a great perspective on that scene though, because I to be honest, I hadn't thought about that. That's just another area where like it's not an experience I've lived, so it
Brag it over here.
kind of went over my head.
Stable
But
relationships.
that's a really cool perspective on that though. I like that you brought that up.
Yeah, so that was, yeah. I don't know why, but at the time, like I'm sure I had long distance relationships or times where someone went away to college or something, and like it hit me there while watching this for sure. The other uncomfortable scene, since we're in here, kind of reminded me of a Black Mirror episode again. Was the surrogates, like how they utilize surrogates for intimacy. Like what a wild concept. And you think that like maybe on the surface, especially in 2013, you're like, this is wild. But in 2026, with everything going on and with like legal loopholes and stuff, I like it wouldn't shock me if they found a way to make that legal, and somehow it's like a swerve around prostitution legislation. So like I don't like, you're hearing it now in 2026. We'll see what happens in a couple of years, but
I honestly feel like that seems like a realistic thing that probably goes on to not necessarily I mean maybe the AI thing now, but that like person wanting to connect with a couple that they're not a part of. Yeah. It seems like a thing that people probably do go through in a way. Also, just another small but really meaningful performance in that film. I feel like forgive me because I can't think of the actor's name, but she played Angela in Mr. Robot, the one who plays the surrogate in that scene. But I can't think of the actor's name, unfortunately. But again, another small but really powerful performance there. Like she barely has any lines, but she's portraying a lot of emotion and going through a lot in that experience.
that's another thing about this film is like every character for the most part is very impactful with like the screen time they have, and like regardless of how long it is. Like the Olivia Wilde scene wasn't that much. The Kristen Wiig scene, she's only featured once, and it was, you know. And okay, so to kind of go back on a couple of things, Olivia Wilde, her credited name is Blind Date.
Okay, so yeah, no proper name.
Surrogate date Isabella is Portia Doubleday. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, shout out to that performance, and also she's incredible in Mr. Robot too.
Yeah, and if we're shouting out performances, another character who's in it kind of briefly and kind of it was another one that took me by surprise because I didn't even clock the voice, but it's Brian Cox who plays Alan Watts, the AI version of Alan Watts, basically. And I was devastated because I had the opportunity to interview the cast of War of the Rohirrim, and Brian Cox actually plays Helm Hammerhand. For all the Lord of the Rings nerds in the chat, he played Helm Hammerhand, and I got to see him speak at a panel, and I was like excited because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get interview him. I'm going to talk about how much I love her, and unfortunately, he did not do interviews that day, but he had another powerful performance, and this is like another life experience hit, whether it was a parallel on purpose or not. But that the feeling of Samantha talking to the Alan Watts character, like it reminded me of like times where like maybe cheating's involved in a relationship, or you sense something's wrong with like don't worry, it's just a friend. Like I got a little of that with this movie, but also it's just like the painful realization that like Samantha and Theo aren't a great match because of like their differing, dare I say, backgrounds. They're like not even human, but Samantha's AI super intelligent, and then Theo's limited to the human body. So it was an interesting it's just so that's like a sci-fi element, right, of two AI chatbots basically falling in love with each other, and it's just a devastating still, like brilliant writing on Spike Jonze's part and just melding this all together. But yeah, I think that touches upon all for the most part. Do we miss any? Were there other standout performances?
Oh, I mean, we haven't mentioned Rooney Mara yet, playing Catherine, Theo's ex-wife. That's a Rooney Mara is always great in everything she pops up in.
And she had a devastating line. I don't know if I took notes on it, but it was something she said to him when she found out that he was dating AI. But basically, she's horrified and accuses him of not being able to handle real human emotions. And I was wondering, did you share that perspective at the time of that fight, or were you a little bit like, were you sympathizing with Theo's perspective? Like at that time, was it sobering for you, or you're like, no, I'm totally on board with what Catherine's saying.
I kind of think for me, it was more just really solidifying the fact that he was really struggling to grow emotionally and take accountability for any of the reasons why their relationship fell apart. I do think by the end, when you get to the point where you're hearing the letter he's writing her, I think you see some growth in that letter and in that last shot where you see him with Amy Adams and their friendship connection. But I think at the point of when him and Catherine meet up, I I don't know. I think that was kind of a low point for my sympathy for Theo. I think I was kind of like, yeah, she's not wrong here.
Grow up, dude. Yeah, I agree. It was like a devastatingly sobering conversation they had, and it's interesting because I'm pretty sure, yeah, obviously he's dating the AI, so you do feel a little bad for Theo's character of like he's showing a little bit of happiness, and then his ex-wife's like, "What are you doing, man?" So you feel bad, and then the other low blow of this movie is it gets to a point where the AI they basically decide that they're going to move on.
Mm,
Like all the operating systems are like
they almost become sentient.
sentient and just move on, right? And I have a couple questions there, but we'll see if we get to all of them. But how did you feel with that story arc of AI? Do you feel like logically that makes sense for AI to just get to a point where it becomes sentient? It's like, all right, peace out.
I think that's another aspect of kind of watching this movie for the first time now, as opposed to 2013, where I feel like that's a discussion that's been had around AI so many times now. Where if you watch this in 2013 or shortly thereafter, I feel like there wasn't so much dialogue going on about it. So I think if I had watched it at the time, I probably would have been pretty terrified by that setup and been like, "Oh man, we're doomed. This is gonna happen." I think watching it now, I don't know if I'm just like jaded or desensitized to it at this point, but it almost just feels like, yeah, maybe I don't know. You know what I mean? I feel like there's been so many conver Of course, I don't want that to happen. That's frightening. I also think it's a funny choice to have Alan Watts be the philosopher who sort of leads Samantha to this enlightenment. Alan Watts, who famously had the whole Memento Mori speech, which is, you know, remember that we all must die. And here he is, like his thoughts all lumped into some AI bot now who's teaching another AI to become, you know, sentient. I thought that was a good bit in there, unless I'm reading into it poorly, but that's how I took that. What you said something a moment ago that prompted a question that I had for you as well. You mentioned being able to see Theo have some sense of happiness for a bit, and I think one of the things this film poses as another central question is step back from the AI subplot. For no, it's not a subplot; it's the plot. But step back from the AI of it for a moment and just kind of think, like, what is this film trying to say about people finding happiness in ways that work for them and isn't really harming anyone else around them. I think there's some dialogue that happens between Amy and Theo where she kind of sympathizes with this mindset where she's like, who cares if it works for you? You're having a good time, whatever. So I don't know. I think what did you kind of think of that? I feel like to me that was one of the other kind of central themes that came through to me.
That's a heavy question. Yeah, I love how they have the Amy Adams character in this because she's kind of mirroring the same thing for the most part what Theo's going through, right? Like she's kind of unhappy with her life. I believe she was trying to do the documentary, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like trying to be creative and
And her husband makes fun of it when she tries to show it.
yep. So she's not getting support and I guess with that piece, we are seeing that in real time now. Like, I think it was John Oliver. I was watching his show where he was highlighting this. And what we're seeing is people are getting, programmed feedback that's all positive on everything they do. Like, you can have an insane idea, and AI is going to be like, that's brilliant. Let's iterate on that and come up with more ways to make it brilliant.
Mm,
So there's a sense of realism there of she was looking for approval and getting it with her AI bot. And how that mirrors Theo is by the end of it, like both of them are having relationships with their AI and they both have to deal with the heartbreak. One thing that, I mean, this is like being a hopeful romantic or whatever, is like I was hoping there was like a sliver of like maybe Amy Adams and him will like have trauma bond basically, and maybe they'll lead somewhere. And maybe the film kind of does that, but
I think they kind of dismiss it earlier on in the film when who is it? I think Samantha asks him if him and Amy ever dated, and he's like, "Oh, long ago in college, it just didn't work out." I think that was kind of a quick way of dismissing that in a way. But I think the choice to have them not become romantically involved kind of speaks for itself in the end. I think it's a good choice to have Theo's only meaningful human connection by the end just be this like one true friend he has, and kind of showing him connecting with any human in a meaningful way, and having that connection there to fall back on, and sort of help him to hopefully grow and figure out his own emotional shortcomings, and you know hopefully come out the other side. I feel like there's a lot of like really impactful quotes in this that we didn't really touch on. The one where it's like, sometimes I think I felt everything I'm ever going to feel. Like that one, that's a gut punch.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, so sometimes I think I've felt everything I'm ever going to feel. And from here on out, I'm not going to feel anything new, just lesser versions of what I've already felt. So, dealing with breakups and all that in 2013, like that was like a real concern I had where I was just like was that like the best relationship I ever had, and is everything after that going to be lesser? And luckily, you live life, you learn that eventually you'll find something that's more fulfilling, or you grow from the experience of being alone. So I'm glad I have hindsight there to talk about it now. But yeah, at the time, like when you're going through something, like maybe you're not thinking as rationally. So stuff like you have thoughts like that. And yeah, that's echoing back to what I said earlier, is like I feel like this movie did a great job of just, even though it's sci-fi, showing like the perspective of going through a breakup and like a realistic way of how it happens and how you deal with it. So that was a great line. Uh,
Yeah, I feel like it also just touches a lot on just sort of general human emotion, and depression even, and it's one of those lines when you hear it and it hits you and you're like, wow. It's like when you have a feeling but you've never had words put to it before, and then you hear something that connects with that feeling, and you're like, you just get that wave of like being seen and felt by those thoughts, and it's like that's heavy.
yeah, 100% agree. And I guess a final question about characters. Do you think this is Walking Phoenix's best movie?
No. Best movie or best
Best
performance?
performance, I should
No.
say.
No. Have you seen The Master?
No.
You should watch The Master. That to me is Joaquin Phoenix's best
All
performance.
right, I'm gonna have to check it out. The only other performance like that comes to mind for me for him was actually the first Joker.
That was strong.
But this movie for this one hits me in many ways, so well, it has a place in my heart of being number one. But now I got something else to watch, so that's good. One thing I totally forgot to mention earlier, and it doesn't really fit here, but whatever. The visuals and cinematography looked beautiful. And I remember thinking of like, as I kind of got more mature, I guess I could say, of like my cinema love, I started looking into other things like, okay, what are movies I like the cinematography for, and then I'll go look up that cinematographer, see what else they've done, see how it compares with other directors, and lo and behold, the goat Hoyt van Hoytema is the cinematographer for this absolutely beautiful movie that still looks pretty good in 2026. And for those who don't know, that's basically the main person that Christopher Nolan uses. I don't know if the camera shows. I got two of those bad boys up on the screen or up in the back there, Interstellar and Dunkirk. He's probably one of my favorite cinematographers. And I'm going to have to look into now from getting my exposure with you of Wes Anderson, the people he used, because those movies are beautiful. So I'm sure I'm going to find things I like there.
Yeah, Hoyt van Hoytema is truly elite for sure. That's in the one thing I love about this movie is the color palette in it and the color grading, and it looks unlike most things that come out now. It's just got that true like film grain feel to it, and it's a, it feels like the color palette is almost like its own character in a way. I also think having this film released in 2013, but it was set in 2025, and I feel like they did a pretty good job of capturing a fairly realistic looking 2025. I mean, they didn't go the Blade Runner route with the full
Flying
neo
cars.
noir. Yeah, yeah. So I feel like it was a pretty subtle but pretty spot on depiction of that.
Yeah, and through my research, I was finding they intentionally they chose colors from my understanding. Like they got rid of blue to the best of their ability because blue kind of has like a kind of cold, sterile look. So they wanted the future to feel warm and kind of lend itself. I think having a warm visual with heavy subject is kind of like that. When two ideas contradict each other, it can be powerful. Like for those of you tuning in still, Ryan and I come from a background of heavier music, and a lot of times, like some of the best songs have like the quietest like lows up to like the harshest possible like guitar tones, and it's always nice when you have the clash. So I feel like they did a good job there with the color palette. And the other thing though, with technology and kind of predicting the future, I feel like where they got it slightly off, it's still going to happen. I feel like people, and we're already seeing it now with the new generation of kind of having a reluctance to technology and phones. Like you have our generation who grew up like basically with the internet starting to become popularized and smartphones and all that, so we're kind of hooked on it, but all the other generations grew up with it, so they don't see it as anything special. And we've seen backlash with like AI being brought up in stuff. So what this film did was it tried to make the technology fit into the aesthetic. So like the phone is minimalistic, no screen, or for the most part no screen. The earpieces are tiny, so they're not like the ugly white things that everyone wears. I don't want to get sued, so I won't say company. So I thought I think if I were to predict right now, I would say in the future we're going to be there where technology is going to blend in instead of kind of being like a flashy thing we hold. So
Interesting. I liked the choice of the aesthetic of the phones in this movie, though. I feel like it really fit with the like retro chic look of the clothing and everything.
yeah,
I thought it was pretty
even
cool. The
computers
yeah, yeah,
look like furniture basically.
yeah, yep.
And dare I segue into another thing? The Expanse is a really awesome show that I love, and they have phones that I think are probably more leaning on the sci-fi futuristic, but it's basically just a clear piece of plastic that has some kind of hologram that
Mm.
kind of goes slightly above, which is similar to the computer designs in Her. But I would have loved that too in this movie, but
Yeah, I feel like it would have felt
too
like it didn't fit
sci-fi.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's that furniture look. Like, so kudos to the art department, Spike Jones, whoever like honed in on this. Should like the technology should just blend in with the surroundings. Like I think that's That was a brilliant move, and I predicted in the future we're gonna get there. Which movie do you think tackled loneliness? I don't want to say better, but maybe more in line with your life experiences. Like, did you feel like because like Her has loneliness in the form of relationships, which you bragged about having no problems with, and Royal Tenenbaums kind of has more of the family dynamic of loneliness. Where did that stand for you? And watching these, rewatching them, and doing research for this podcast.
This is an interesting question. I think that they both really connect with me in their own ways. I certainly felt, an emotional connection with both films. I think I'd probably give a little bit of an edge to Tenenbaums just because there's a little bit more dynamic. I think you get a little bit of differentiation in seeing how each different character is dealing with their own dysfunctional nature. So I think that sort of broadens, the scope of who's dealing with what, and you kind of have a bigger bag to choose from of like what you can and will connect to. And so I think it almost sort of naturally lends itself a little bit more to that level of connection. But I think certainly I could see how somebody with more familiar lived experiences could connect on a deeper level with her. And again, not to say that I didn't find that emotional connection with it, especially because of some of the broader topics we've talked about, like the warning signs of technology, and certainly the warning against this lack of human connection is something that I really resonated with, because that's something that's been heavy on my mind the past handful of years. And certainly COVID sort of steered my brain in that direction, I think, because when you have something you take for granted taken away from you so quickly, it's really meaningful to kind of figure out how to make sure you keep places for that in your life and not take it for granted.
So, talking about human connectiveness, like one of the reasons why we started this film club was we want to build a community of, sharing our love of films. And the dream is that we get multiple discussions and hopefully even one day do in person shows. Like, we would love to have a local gathering and do this, record live in person and have multiple Q&As and all that. So definitely, if you're still watching and you think we missed anything on these films, submit them, and you can either leave them in the comments. We'll have in the description a form you can fill out, or email us at fellowshipfilmclub@gmail.com, and we can even shoehorn some of your discussions for these movies in future episodes. Say we're discussing movies you don't care about, fast forward to the discussion area, and we might talk about Her and Royal Tenenbaums again if someone submits. So look out for that.
And like we mentioned previously, going forward, we're going to start mentioning at the end the next films we're covering. That way, you guys will have some time to watch along with us and get those thoughts in order. Send them in ahead of time, and then they can be included in the episode if you want us to include them. Also, feel free to tell us who you are and what part of the world you're from if you feel comfortable doing that, because that's always interesting to know where we're reaching. And it's fun to see the different ways people connect with different media based on where they are in the world and their lived experience there.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. And maybe what we should do is, before we go into the community section, let's announce the two movies we're going to cover. That way, you have something to look forward to and something to prep for now. So, would you like to do the honors?
So the film we're watching from my favorites list is going to be John Carpenter's The Thing.
And I haven't seen it before, shockingly. So, I'm going to be checking out yet another cinema blind spot. So, I can't wait. And for me, we're going to be diving into a classic, which I call 28 Days Later. And it is actually my first exposure to Cillian Murphy. So, way before the Oscars, way before everything else. I remember, and my family probably remembers, the day I saw 28 Days Later, I said, Cillian Murphy is my favorite actor. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to cover this movie is my first exposure to him. I've been following his career ever since, and I feel like on a film level, 28 Days Later was top tier zombie genre film. And maybe that's a hot take we can just clip right there, get yelled at in the comments. So, yeah, those will be the next two movies we cover. So, if those interest you, feel free. We'll most likely release that update or that episode in August at some point. We're trying to space these out about a month, so it gives people plenty of time to watch. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes, and we'll get a little spooky this time instead of sad. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so now we're going to be jumping into the community section. For this first episode, we had to utilize Reddit, and some Reddit users were gracious enough to submit some really thoughtful questions. Pretty much blew me away, some of these. So yeah, let's see what we got here. So this was from Reddit user not broke broken in, and they are talking about Tenenbaums. They said in Tenenbaums, you have multiple characters who endlessly revisit their toxic past or early development and never escape this pattern. They dress retro, or they dress like they've always dressed, or keep the same haircuts their entire lives. Margot is always the adopted daughter. Royal doesn't change. Childhood crushes are kept into adulthood. Are they really people if they can't escape their early programming? And it looks like they segue into her. Do Theodore or Samantha evolve past their own programming? Can they? Dang, that was a really thoughtful question. I didn't even put two and two together. That's great. So, yeah, what are your thoughts there?
It's a good connection there. So to tackle the first one, I feel like it sort of brings me back to something I mentioned earlier on, which is how when you really break down the core of these characters, they are very, nuanced human things. And they're very, exaggerated versions of these things. So you get very whimsical and comical characters and people who you like are not actually going to cross paths with in your everyday life. Like I've never met a Chaz Tenenbaum before or an Eli Cash. They're very hyperbolic versions of these things, but I think at the heart of them, they're all just really broken, sad people who are, codependent, missing something in their lives that they're looking for. So, to answer that question, are they still people if they can't escape their early programming? I think that film sort of shows us a way where they're all trying to break free from that. And there's maybe a glimmer of hope at the end that some of them are making some progress. So I do think that yes, they are still people, and I think that there is that, like I said, that glimmer of hope that they're doing what they can to put that work in and overcome those developmental disadvantages they've been brought up with.
Yeah, I feel like in her, towards the end, we do feel like there is some resolution to Theodore and his ability to kind of deal with his future and intimacy, hopefully in the future. So I feel like he was able to, in my personal opinion, his character arc grew, which was great. And like as we discussed earlier with Royal, it's kind of like a asterisk on whether or not he grew based on the final shot and all that. So what's interesting though is Samantha. It's like, did she grow so much that she grew herself out of existence? Almost is what it seemed like. So
That's an interesting look at that. I hadn't really thought of it that way. It's like, did all those OS voices just move on to some other like space where they can exist on their own?
the
Yeah, but yeah, that's an interesting look at it. I hadn't thought of it that way. Where like, did they almost just kind of poof themselves away and because it's like if if no human is interacting with the operating system in order to give it those commands or those instructions, what does go on? I certainly don't have the answers, but
God, it's like the age old what if a tree falls in the woods. God. All right, that was a great question. I think we have another great question from them too. Theo writes fake words that his company sells to people with real feelings they cannot communicate. Eli writes popular counterfactual trash with lots of made up words. Friscalating dusklate. Tenenbaums have deliberately artificial title cards and labels throughout, and so brackets the entire movie with this artificiality. What can we trust in these movies? Another great question from Not Broken In. Wow.
I think that both of those points really just help to further solidify the, emotional shortcomings of all these characters. I like the question of what can we trust in these movies. I think if you look at it in a little bit of that like unreliable narrator type of sense, where it's like how much of this hyperbole and drama is coming from the fact that these characters have such a skewed worldview. I think that's certainly an interesting way to think about it. I think to me, it more speaks to the lack of emotional maturity that they have. And it's a good way of really showing us, the ways that they interact with the world and how that differs from how we as the viewers interact with the world and sort of shows us that gap in our emotional intelligence versus those characters and so on. I think one last point I have is just touching on Theo's job in her because we didn't talk about that at all in our discussion.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting choice of a career for him to have. I think it's really fascinating to me that he shows really immense emotional intelligence when it comes to other people's feelings. Like those letters he writes are great and thoughtful and beautiful. And anytime it comes to dealing with his own emotions and feelings, that's just gone completely. So I think that was a really smart choice to make that his job. And I think it also adds to the whole theme of, warning against this lack of emotional connection in the sense that we're seeing these folks receiving letters with all these thoughtful messages and feelings that are coming from a random stranger in a computer. And I think that we're led to believe that, these people receiving these letters probably assume that their loved ones are writing them.
100%. Because they're using the handwriting of the yeah.
Yeah.
And what's kind of sad is in that future, they assume a human's writing the words, but in our future or our present, AI is probably writing loved ones messages right now, which is super depressing. And I'm I here's a hot take: how many people used AI to make their wedding vows? That was probably super higher than you're imagining, which is painful, painful. But yeah, that was a great question. Oh my god. I think you had some submissions too.
Yeah. So I reached out to friends and family who either are just people close to me or friends I have that I know are cinephiles. So the first question that I had from which came from my wife Kayla, she watched her with me. She wanted to know from us if this movie was made now with our current knowledge of AI, what would look the same or different in this film in relation to the themes and lessons and morals of it, not so much the physical look of it.
Ooh, that's a heavy hitting question. Ooh, well, I think what the sad realization I just had there with wedding vows, I feel like that could have been a good touch of AI helping Theodore do his job. Like there could have been something there where AI could have caused almost like a. I'm coming up with a sequel right now. If Theodore used AI to write his letters and it kind of went haywire, I guess you could say, because I do know a small part of the movie was Samantha took his best letters, compiled it into a book, submitted it, got published, and all that. And that's kind of a reflection of what AI does now. Like, I'm sure there's authors out there using AI to help compile things. And that's, in the moral grandstanding of things. I feel like if you're using AI as a tool, it can be fine, but if you're using it like, hey, write me a book and make it 1,000 words and like that's a that's just slop. But yeah, to go back, it would be interesting if like Theodore somehow used AI and it like messed up his job in some way. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of irony there that they could have played on. But yeah, that was a. How about you? Do you have a?
I think one of the things that this question makes me think of is how would the morals or the suggested moral, standing of this relationship between human and computer look if this movie were made now? Like, do you think that people would feel as uncomfortable as they probably did in 2013? Or like, I honestly don't know what I think. I feel like maybe certain people would watch that movie, like that version of this movie, if it came out now, and they would just not blink an eye at it. They would probably just be like, "Oh, I know a guy who did that."
Yeah, it's unfortunately like the John Oliver special I watched recently, and I guess like that was a compilation of news stories that came out of people like there was anywhere from using AI to scam people, pretending to be your loved ones, like AI like doing video, AI manipulation. There was messed up ones like I don't want to get taken down from YouTube, but involving the one of the storylines in Royal Tenenbaums, I was convincing people to do that and saying it was a good idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. Yeah, I did see that.
So, like AI can do dangerous things, and hopefully the people that are profiting off of them, or I mean a lot of them aren't making a lot of profit right now, but should put in some safety guardrails and not let it go too crazy. But I'm sure like there's real life examples that are more depressing than the movie Her, which is sad already. So that's unfortunately where we are right now. But like with everything, like the Wild West, right, things are lawless and then eventually bad things happen and we kind of tailor society in the right direction. So we're in the Wild West right now. Bad things are happening, and hopefully we learn and, dare I say, get more people that are technologically sound and understand it to be in our political spectrum right now. So that would be a good, hopeful thought.
My other thought on this question is, do you feel that people would look at the theme of human connection differently now versus 2013?
I think, like you mentioned earlier, post COVID, there's definitely a different viewpoint on this for sure. People who lived it and were old enough to experience COVID and like the heartbreaking stuff from not being able to see your like ailing grandparents and or loved ones being isolated away from them if they're immune compromised. Like I think going through that and seeing the isolation and the need for connecting, it's like you don't know what you have until it's gone kind of thing. It's like that old adage. And I feel like going through post there's probably a clear line in the sand pre-COVID, post-COVID, and I feel like AI kind of spun up a lot after COVID as well. So that might be the best line in the sand there.
Mm. I think, to me, having AI be where it is now and having it be so real and present and not this, looming threat of the future, I think that almost might make that theme hit a little harder if it were made now. I think, having the current and present thing right in front of us, having that be that juxtaposition there with the human emotion and connectivity, I think it almost might make that theme of the film, it might get driven home a little bit better, to be honest. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know. I think to some people, having the thing in front of them and feel more tangible and real might help to feel the negative aspects of it rather than it being this looming threat.
I agree. And speaking of feeling intangible, this thing here is a standard Blu-ray because they have not made a 4K Blu-ray yet. So if I were to grandstand right now, please make this a 4K release at some point.
Also, just buy physical media. That's my PSA. That will happen often.
And hopefully something we cover in this channel to the best of our ability. Well, to kind of give background, like we're going to try to watch these movies in the best possible version of them if we can. So I'm trying to buy 4K releases on whatever we cover if I haven't seen it before. And you can kind of see here in frame. So right now, Her is only available in Blu-ray, and the Royal Tenenbaums is only available in 4K for the Criterion collection. So I'd be curious if they release like a standard version at some point. But
Some of his more recent films have had standard releases prior to the Criterion releases. I know the last, I want to say 3 or 4 of them, I think have had standard releases prior to the Criterion collection. I think Wes Anderson has like a family connection to Criterion as a company, though, which I don't know. Not that I don't think his films are deserving of all being in the Criterion collection, but I think that's a thing. But yeah, I think we have one last community discussion point. So this comes from my friend David. He is a fellow cinephile. So he said something that comes to mind immediately in Her, outside of it being a complete foreshadowing of how many people in 2026 are using AI in place of personal relationships, is the style icon that is Joaquin Phoenix's character. I feel like there was a resurgence of Donegal high-rise trousers and band collar shirts once that movie came out. I admit it even was looking for dress pants like that back then, especially because this film was set in 2025. For 2013, they kind of nailed it. I feel like people still dress like this. Call it aging hipster chic. Even the mustache, at least half of our production staff at work is sporting one.
oh my god,
Yeah.
that's spot on.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
mustache for sure came back too. Like that was totally spot on. The hipster wear, I think that's now, isn't it? Like people are wearing more baggier clothes.
Yeah, I think that's what he was alluding to. How this film was set in 2025, and they pretty much predicted a full style resurgence that is happening right now.
It's insane. And if you look back in history too, a lot of fashion is cyclical and music cyclical too. So it's interesting that they got the actual right pattern because it was kind of like it seemed like the movie had like 70s influence in some styles. Like the furniture seemed kind of 70s ish. But I don't know. Do you think this style is more 80s?
I'm not the greatest expert on this kind of stuff. I feel like I'm the kind of person when like I see something and I'm like, oh, I like that, but I'm not great at pinpointing the. But I think some of it certainly does feel 70s
70s
to
esque.
me.
Yeah. And it seems like and the different generations are going through different styles, right? Like when Stranger Things came out, the 80s kind of came back a bit for people. The younger generations watching Friends and all the 90s stuff, so they're dressing like people did in the 90s. So yeah, it seems to be but yeah, they like you said, they nailed the look for 2025. That's insane.
Yeah, it gives me a little bit of a Kurt Vonnegut vibes. How accurate they were in this film in predicting many things about how today would look when they made this 13 years ago. So it's pretty impressive.
I read somewhere that Spike he went to futurists and other people that like study AI and that kind of helped shape the movie. So, whoever he worked with for coordination, pretty crazy.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
And I think the other small tidbit I didn't get to was I think from what I read, the kind of the lightning or the lightning rod or the light bulb moment of this movie's conception was Spike Jones was messing around with one of those like crude AI bots from back in the day. Like think of like AIM Messenger, stuff like that, where it was just kind of very programmatic. And that kind of planted the seed for this idea. And then there's I don't know if he confirmed it, but the other thing we didn't touch upon was the rumor is this is a response movie to his former partner, Sofia Coppola, right? In her movie Lost in Translation. And we can have a segue there of that starred Bill Murray, who's also in the Royal Tenenbaums. So there's the degrees of Bill Murray. Maybe we'll do that going forward. I wonder how he connects to the Thing. My dad was the Thing. So yeah, like I think that wraps up our community section. So yeah, like we said earlier, if you have any, if we missed anything, definitely submit it to us. We'll have some stuff in the description, and we look forward to any discussion points you want to bring to the table. We'd love to hear it because right now it's just our opinions on the movies and all of our friend groups that we talk to about these movies. But we'd love to hear your voice for sure.
Thank you to everyone who submitted their thoughts and questions and discussions. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us in the film club. Tune in next month when we cover The Thing and 28 Days Later.
Sounds good to me. See you next time. Does that work for you?
Unless we think of a quippy, like, one-liner to end it off on, I'm about to pee my pants.